stop, Dave. I'm afraid.
Why don't you play us something, baby? Why don't you play us something? Why don't you play us something, baby?
Start? I don't feel so good.
It's fucking molten!
Up. Whoa, 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 whoa. It almost didn't stop. That was scary. That was terrifying. What's up, you tiny little minuscule bitches? You're so little. I can barely see you. You're so small. Welcome to another Wednesday episode, baby. To another Wednesday solo pod. Talking about, presumably, things that I saw at the Calgary International Film Festival. And because it's Spooky-tober, I decided I will talk about all of the horror movies I saw. There was actually probably more, but I can only fit 5 into this episode. I gotta draw the line somewhere because I have other things to do today. But I figured I should probably talk more about the film festival since it happened 2 weeks ago and I haven't covered too much of it, but I'd like to get some clicks out of it. So here we go. So today on the show, we're going to be 5 of the, we're all from the late nights, which is generally my favorite at the film festival. I like the genre stuff. I like the horror. I think that you get, it's often you don't get another chance to see a lot of these things. When it comes to film festivals, I said this before, I like to go to the stuff that's not popular. And usually, horror movies are pretty light. But several of these were shot locally. 3 of them, actually, that I'm going to be talking about. Well, not all locally, but a lot of them had the cast and crew at them. So I'm going to be talking about local movie Zed, local movie True Fiction, Canadian movie Blood Quantum, and then 2 other movies. One from Hammer Horror called The Lodge, and another one from producer of The Gracie Strangler, Ant Timpson, Come to Daddy, starring Elijah Wood. So we're going to be talking about all 5 of those today. Hopefully that will come out to a solid episode. So I guess I'll just go in order of how I saw them. I think I have them lined up. So the first one I saw was Zed. This is a Canadian horror movie shot locally. In fact, was shot about 5 blocks from this very recording studio, just off of downtown Calgary. And it's I didn't expect much going into this because it's a low budget Canadian horror. I've seen many of them. Usually, they don't know what they're doing when it comes to being scary. But this movie, in fact, one of the scarier movies I've seen this year. It's shockingly very scary. I think it succeeds better in concept. But the construction of than it does with the character development. But the construction of the scares completely make up for it. It's certainly a film that goes places you don't expect. Not necessarily always for the best as it barrels to the conclusion, but overall it's extremely effective. So Zed is a movie about a kid with an imaginary friend, and I do like this idea when you're making something low budget and you can't afford like too many shots of a monster. And I do prefer the kind of alien 40-minute reveal. We've talked about that on that show many times before. But when you have an imaginary friend, he's predominantly invisible. There's only, I would say, possibly 4 to maybe possibly 5 times where you actually see the monster, only for a split second. And every time, it's the scariest shit I've ever fucking seen. This is true nightmare fuel. I do think you should seek out this movie if you can. I don't know how much of a release it's going to get. I was talking to the producer, and he did mention that they called it Z for several reasons, not Zed. One was because that's the character's name is Z. 2, because they're trying to market it to Americans who say Z. That's fine. I think it works completely fine in this context because the character's name is actually Z. And also, it's kind of like, I don't know about that as being the title. I know there's another movie from the 70s called Z, but this is very specific to the horror genre, and I do like the idea of the imaginary friend, because you can do so many things with it invisible, and the parents not believing that it's real until they do. And that's I think that works out so perfectly. There's a couple scares in this that are so phenomenally well executed. Like, maybe one of the scariest things I've ever seen was the very first scare. And I don't want to reveal too much, but there's a point where he's crawling through like one of those play pens in a McDonald's, and there's like a little opening, like a little window opening in one of the tubes, and he's like crawling through there, and then something really fast. You can barely see it, but it does look like a naked giant creature with long hair crawling very fast. And that like took me off guard immediately, because I go to these film festivals and I sit front row. I'm not afraid of horror movies so much, but sometimes I get startled, and I do get startled easily, which is why I can't watch this fucking Annabelle movies or any of the Conjuring movies in theaters, really, because I get startled too easily. I don't think they're scary, but I do get jumpy, and I was caught off guard by that immediately. In the entire movie, it was like, from there, my anxiety was so high that there was going to be another jump scare. And then they're not very often, but when they are, even when you expect them, they're so successful at being scary. Like, this movie is scary as hell. And I don't say that usually for these very low budget indies, but this is from local director Brandon Christensen. He also made a movie called Stillborn, which I haven't seen yet, but apparently is also pretty scary. That one is a Shudder original, so head on over to Shudder. You can probably find Stillborn. And it's one of those movies that I think is just so well put together up until like it gets a little too messy towards the end. Like, there's points where you're like, oh, we could have probably done without this whole third act. But there are parts to it that's good. 83 minutes doesn't waste your time. Z, highly successful. Buck says 4 stars. I really enjoyed this one. So next up, let's go with Blood Quantum. This is a Canadian horror zombie movie, and it's touted as the first Native American zombie movie. So it features like a pretty unsubtle metaphor of all the Aboriginal people. Even if they get bit, they're immune to the zombie virus, and all the white people get it pretty easily and immediately. And the first thing I noticed about this movie is because they have that immunity, these guys just can't stop getting bit. I know that's like a weird thing for a zombie movie, but in most zombie movies, the entire point of them is trying to not get bit. And this is just like, they can't stop getting bit. There's a point where one of the main characters takes off his shirt and he's literally covered in bite marks. Oh, y'all, these guys just can't stop getting bit. So, I mean, it works for the most part. I don't think it's like the political commentary isn't particularly subtle, which is fine, but it also suffers from being so generic and cliche. There's so many characters. It suffers from that thing where you build up all these characters and then you just start killing off everyone. You start killing off everyone. just like people that you spent like the entire most of the runtime building up, either have like some like mediocre motives to turn evil, or some pretty generic hero motives to die in action saving people that they love. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing when it comes to zombie movies. I just don't think that it does anything that interesting. There's some great kills in it. Great chainsaw work. There's some really fucked up imagery of a mother zombie eating her baby fetus. Things like that are really good. And there's there's some great characters in it, but there's just so many. And like they just die so fast. Like it's almost hard to care about anyone because you're like, they're just all gonna die. It's all good. And it's I think it would have worked better if the acting wasn't so noticeably bad at times. Sure, these are all most of them are professional actors, but like none of them were particularly strong, especially for one of the main characters that really had some like some emotional baggage that they had to convey. I just didn't find them very convincing. And the movie itself, it's very inspired from Tarantino and other types of, like kind of like genre film classic kind of directors, and it almost takes away from it to me how genre it is. But I mean, it's not terrible. Something to think about how this Native American movie is harnessing the power of, I don't know, white media, I guess, because Tarantino's about as white as you can get. It's always fun to see zombies' heads get smashed in, but this is a movie that does suffer from just it keeps going, even when I don't think it needs to. Like there's a great, what feels like a good ending, where the grandfather who's been killing people with a samurai sword the entire time fights his way through like an island of zombies, and it's like, we probably could have just left it there. I didn't have to keep going, I don't think. But it is what it is. I think it's pretty watchable. For the most part, interesting to be the first Aboriginal zombie movie. But I think that's probably mostly what it's going to be remembered for, is that it was a first. I mean, I think even in this film festival, there was a short film that was made before this that was also an Aboriginal zombie movie. So, I mean, where do you draw the line at being first? But I did like it. It is a good time if you just want to watch a pretty mindless zombie killing flick. Just wish it had a little more to say, considering the content. Buck says 3 stars. All right, let's move on to Ant Timpson. He's produced a lot of my favorite weirdo black comedies in the last few years. Out in New Zealand, he produced Deathgasm and Housebound. I like both of those quite a bit. And working with his buddy of Jim Hoskins of Greasy Strangler and that one I saw at the last fest. I forget what that one was called, but it's let me just go to Ant Timpson's producing credits here. I can probably find it. He also produced Turbo Kid. That's cool. Heard that's good. I haven't seen that one. Jim Hoskins of the An Evening with Beverly Loughlin, which I'm a huge fan of. Love that movie. Almost probably more than Greasy Strangler, which I also love. But so this is Ant Timpson's first director credit, starring Elijah Wood, Stephen McHattie, he was actually in another movie I saw at this very same fest called Lucky Grandma. And he's only in that one for like 30 seconds, but the fact that he was in 2 of those, kind of weird, but he's working that indie circuit, obviously. So Come to Daddy, kind of like, it does feel like his buddy his buddy Jim Hoskins, because it's kind of the similar style where people are like just saying sentences and then they just keep repeating it until it's funny. They're like, so you're my dad, hey? Yep, I'm your dad. That's right, I'm your dad. They're just like talking like people don't talk. And I actually find that kind of dialogue very funny, and I think it works better in a Jim Hoskins movie where the whole vibe is like that, but it is also funny here where this movie is kind of funny, but it's more ridiculous than anything. It's more of just like a wild turn of event after a wild turn of event, and it's, to be honest, this one's barely a movie, but again, this one's incredibly watchable. There's so much content here to watch once. So this one, Come to Daddy, starring Elijah Wood. Elijah Wood gets a mysterious letter from his estranged father, who left him and his mother when they were kids, saying, here's a map to my house in Oregon. So he goes to Oregon. He meets his father. Doesn't like him. They don't get along at all. He thinks it's really weird. And then he gets super drunk. They have an argument. And he tries to kill him with a knife and then has a heart attack. And from there, spirals out of control. So he has to get the coroner in there, and they have to get the dead body. And like the whole time weird things are happening with the dead body as it has to stay in the house because of reasons. And like you think that maybe this is going to be a zombie thing. There's like weird noises in the house. There's people in the woods that he keeps noticing when he's looking out the window and stuff. And I don't know how much I want to spoil of this, but eventually he finds out that the guy that was supposedly his father was not actually his father. He finds his father was kidnapped by this guy, and then this kind of spirals out of control into like a blackmail movie. Kind of like, at that point, it kind of loses anything it has to say and just turns into one of the most wildest, just like a wild goose chase of murder and gore. It's very gory, very fucked up. It's it's extremely eccentric characters talking like robots, and it ultimately means nothing, but it's a lot of fun in the moment of watching it. I don't think I would ever see it again. I don't see a situation where I could ever possibly watch this again. That's no knock against the movie. I think it's good in its execution of what it's trying to do, but it's a movie that doesn't have much replay value because once you see the reveal, you're like, okay, I get it now, and it's completely lost its charm. And by the time I finished this, like even by the time the credits rolled, I was like, I really like this to begin with, and it just kind of spirals out of control, unfortunately. Elijah Wood's quite good in this. He plays a very eccentric kind of musician who is very unsuccessful, and is kind of like an influencer, kind of like a stereotype millennial. And I think he does a good job with the tone of it's a very dark comedy, and it's extremely unpredictable. That's for sure. Once it like removes the character and suspense and just turns into like gore gags, I don't know what to do with it. But I did like it. So Buck's gonna have to say 3 stars on that bad boy. What should we talk about next? I guess we'll go with The Lodge. I didn't take much notes for this one, but I probably like this one the most out of all of them. Maybe Z. The Lodge is a Hammer horror movie, but it does feel more like an A24. And Hammer horror is kind of out here reminding that A24 that they did art house horror first. And I mean, Hammer's kind of had a rough kind of go at it recently but they have kind of been making their way back onto the people's consciousness. I guess with The Woman in Black was the big one. I don't know if there was I don't know how many other ones they released. Let's go to filter by newest first. Okay. So yeah, they haven't done too much recently, besides The Woman in Black, and a couple other quiet ones. Let me 2010. That the remake of the that's the Matt Reeves remake of that Swedish Norwegian film. Yeah, I forget where that one was from. I do like Let the Right One In. So this is their newest one. I guess the last one was 2014. So they've been quiet for a while. But I do like the idea of Hammer being around, because A24 is kind of taken the spot of being the only guys making great art house horror. Maybe there's a couple other ones, a Silly Scope, and there's a few around here. This one stars Riley Keough. Is that her name? Of Mad Max, Logan Lucky. A lot of A24 stuff. It Comes at Night, Under the Silver Dome, American Honey, House That Jack Built. I've actually seen most of the movies she's been in. Magic Mike, Hold the Dark, Jeremy Solner movie. I forgot about that movie. Damn. Sometimes Jeremy Solner just sneaks up on you, So it stars her as I guess she was the last survivor from a Jonestown cult where they all kill themselves but her, and she's supposed to continue the legacy of her father who ran the cult, and do another sacrifice. But she's been since reformed and is trying to live a regular life. So this movie takes place it stars these two kids and the father, and it opens with the mother dropping them off, and then the father saying that he really wants a divorce. He's going to marry this other chick, and she immediately fucking blows her brains out on screen. And there's this guy 2 rows behind me that just it was completely silent when she fucking blows her head off. And this one guy's oh, that was fucking awesome. And people are like, what the fuck? There's this black guy in the front row that was whoa, settle down, psycho. And it was almost to the point where people were heckling this guy that was I don't know if he realized what he was getting into. This is a film fest. It ain't a fucking midnight screening where you fucking scream out. And he's it was so unexpected. And he just started talking. It's guy, stop talking. It's all good. You can just stop talking. So essentially what happens is the father's now taking kids. Got to go on a business trip right before Christmas. So he takes them out to their lodge or their cabin out in the woods. And they get to spend the next 2 days with their new stepmom. They don't like her very much because they blame her for the death of their mom. And it turns into, don't know if they're playing a trick on her or if the madness is truly setting in, because it does play with kind of surrealism and flashbacks and visions, and it's very surreal. It's very I guess it's David Lynchian, but it's not quite that. It's more Hereditary, honestly. This movie does remind me of a lot of Hereditary. There's even a dollhouse with all of them in it, almost exactly they pretty much stole that shit from Hereditary. This movie's has a very similar setup to Hereditary, and it deals with similar themes of loss and guilt and grief. And it works so well in this snowy landscape that you can't really escape from. And I think that's what's great about it, is that you can't escape from it. It has some real stretches in logic. That's for goddamn sure. When I was walking out of this, I know a lot of people were not happy with it. It's a very slow moving and confusing narrative, and it's on purpose. It's just and it's certainly not fun to watch. But the build up to me is like it's so perfect and effective, because like while she's losing her mind, you can feel yourself losing grip on reality as well. This is another one that I was sitting front row. And if you ever go to an art house theater and it's got that tiny ass screen, you go sit up front, and then you can tune out everyone else in that fucking theater. That's how you should probably watch these kind of movies. This one I highly recommend. This one will very likely get a wide release since it's Hammer, or at the very least, it's going to be on VOD soon. And it's just like the way the kids terrorize. Once you find out they're terrorizing her, and it's not anything mystical, it becomes a new kind of madness that is. I think they capture it so spectacularly, and I can see why someone wouldn't like this, but to me, this is the exact kind of horror that I like. It's the reason why I like Hereditary. This is from Veronica Franz and Servin Fela. They did Good Night Mommy. I think I saw that one. That one was pretty not good. I don't remember it being good, but I do remember that name. There's Nish or something. Not much information here on Letterboxd. Austrian, yeah. Cool. Buck says 4-star in The Lodge. That's one you got to check out if you like psychological horror for sure. One more to go. True Fiction. This is another local shot film. This one's slightly out of town in an abandoned cabin once again. I saw this back to back with The Lodge actually, and boy were they similar. So this one, I actually like the concept of this one quite a bit. It's about a washed up horror writer, kind of like a Stephen King, or maybe like kind of lower tier than Stephen King, maybe more like I don't have a good example because I don't read much horror books, especially kind of the shittier stuff like V.C. Andrews maybe. But it's like it's about this writer who hires this girl to come and he wants to do some tests on her on fear, and he's writing a book about a guy doing the exact same thing. So he brings her in. He has like people walking around in this cabin. He makes her watch these like horrific videos. It's occasionally pretty stressful, shocking and violent, but the characters they spend so much time trying to confuse you, like, because it's a movie about a brilliant writer or a clever writer. Let's say it's about a clever, maybe not a brilliant writer, a clever writer, but it's not like cleverly written, so it's kind of lost. Kind of loses its meaning in my opinion. It gets to the point where it's just like it almost goes for shock more often than anything interesting, and it's too confusing to really tell you, because he introduces the third man, who's his brother, just walking around in a mask and pretending to attack her and stuff, and then it turns out she ends up just like murdering everybody. No spoilers, but she on how she does it, but it is like one of those movies where it's all told through like the guy reading the paper, and he's like, read the paper, you know what happens next, then it happens. You're like, well, I get what you're going for, but I don't think it's particularly successful in what it's trying to do. It's kind of like, it's got like the gore effects are great, and it's kind of like it's certainly low budget, but it doesn't show it so much because the interior of this cabin is so interesting and creepy and weird, and just that it's laid out like down to like all the weird doors, and like there's just details that change throughout the movie, and you're like, why is that changed? Because they're writing this at the same time. a lot of things that throw you off. I just think that it's not particularly smart, even though that's kind of what it boasts, you know. So that one was okay, not my favorite. Buck says 3 stars. I believe that was all 5. So that's the horror episode from the Calgary International Film Festival. And I hope you enjoy the rest of Spooky-tober. We'll be talking about Stephen King. We'll be talking about Child's Play on Sunday. We'll be talking about new Takashi Miike. And what else are we talking about on that episode? I don't remember. Oh, a bunch of Stephen King. Talking about the new Tall Grass on Netflix and Dolores Claiborne, of course. Of course. So tune in for those bad boys. Don't forget me. Forget me when I